Hello, friends, and welcome to another interview with The Mystery of History, where we are just trying to capture eyewitness history from men and women who have lived it. And I'm happy to say I have a friend here who has indeed lived some history, not only here in the United States, but over the skies of Vietnam. So his name is Roy Cash. Welcome, Roy. I'm so glad you could be with us.
It's good to be here. And we are delighted to have you in our home. So I look forward to contributing to your program, The Mystery of History.
Yes, thank you. Well, as a quick intro, I want to tell my students first just how I know you personally, because we're not only friends, but we're also church members. And a little lesser known fact, you did some historical editing for The Mystery of History Volume 4, particularly helping me with military lingo. So on top of all your accomplishments, I believe you were an English major?
Yes, I majored in English and literature at Memphis State University, which is now University of Memphis. I love language. I think it's very important that language be used properly, just like history, and because it's important to history. It helped me out a lot in my career. There was some disadvantage going into the Navy because I was competing with people who had majored in physics, engineering, math, and they wondered how an English major was going to become a fighter pilot. But
well, you showed them.
I held my own.
Very good. Well, Roy, we have a lot to cover today, but I would like to give your bio because I do want our students to just know the magnitude of your service, the depth of your faith, and your love for your family. So I am going to read this for our students so they'll know who you are. So a sneak peek, here we go. Roy Cash is a retired U.S. Navy captain with a highly distinguished record of service to his country. His military assignments included Navy fighter squadrons, Chief of Naval Operations at the Pentagon, and 6 consecutive tours of duty as unit commander, which included Fighter Squadron 31, the U.S. Navy's elite and prestigious Top Gun Squadron, which we're going to talk more about later, Carrier Air Wing 14, Fighter Wing 1, USS El Paso, and Amphibious Squadron 2. I hope I said all that right.
Yes.
Okay, very good. Roy accumulated extensive experience during his 30 years of service with nearly 6,000 flights in Navy and Air Force jet fighter aircraft. He covered 1,200 landings on U.S. Navy aircraft carriers and 305 combat missions in Vietnam. But I am not done, there's more. Roy was awarded 25 military and combat ribbons and medals, including the Silver Star Medal, which is the nation's 3rd highest award for valor in combat. And that was for downing a Russian-made MiG over North Vietnam. That was in 1968, which we are also going to talk about later. Now, Roy himself was shot down in 1972 near North Vietnam, but was rescued at sea by helicopter unharmed. Thank you, Lord, and that's another story on our radar. Well, continuing on, Roy speaks frequently to inspire patriotism. He sings as a member of the Johnny Cash family. There's a big reveal there. And he adores his wife and 2 grown children who, by their own merit, I just have to tell a little bit about.
Okay.
So Kelly won Miss America in 1987. Carrie is a Rear Admiral and high-ranking chaplain for the Navy and Marines. And your wife, Billy, speaks, writes, and is on her 7th book written to inspire others. Clearly, friends, this family is all cut from the same cloth, and what a fine one it is. So once again, welcome, Roy.
Thank you very much. I appreciate the intro. By the way, the 25 awards and medals, I refer to that as being in the wrong place at the right time.
I like that. I like that.
So, but I'm blessed to have the family that I'm part of. Awfully proud of Kelly as Miss America 1987, and really proud of our son Kerry, who was selected for Rear Admiral. I even had the honor to conduct the official ceremony promotion for him right here in our home. He now outranks me, and I love that little fact. So we are blessed.
Fantastic. Roy, I thought we might start with the fun side of your bio, the fact that you are related to Johnny Cash, the country legend. So please tell us where you fit in the family tree.
Okay. Johnny was my uncle. Johnny was my dad's younger brother. My dad is the oldest of the Cash sibling, followed by Louise, my aunt, then Jack, the one who died in an accident at school in the movie, if you saw the movie, then Johnny, then Reba, then Joanne and Tom. The only two surviving are Joanne and Tom, my aunt and uncle. Joanne is only 15 to 18 months older than me. Tom, my uncle, is actually younger than me, but he's still my uncle since he's my dad's brother.
Right.
But we grew up mostly, I would think you'd have thought maybe we were either brothers or first cousins. We were that close.
Mm-hmm.
That's where I fit. I'm the eldest nephew of Johnny, and right now I am the eldest remaining Cash male. So I'm the patriarch of the Cash family, if you will.
Well, tell us about some of the songs you contributed.
Okay. The first one, and really the major one that I wrote, is called I Still Miss Someone. I wrote the words to the song while sitting in a boring accounting class at Memphis State. I took out one of the long yellow legal pads that we were using and wrote the words to a tune that I had in my head already. Got home, put it on a tape recorder, the old reel-to-reel recorder. Gave it to Johnny the next time I saw him, which was quite frequently. He always came to see us when he was in town. He took it to Nashville, changed a few of the words to make it more commercial, as he put it. Brought it back to me on a record, a 45 RPM record demo, played it for me and said, well, what do you think, Roy Jr.? What was I going to say? I said, I love it. And he recorded it on the flip side, as they called it back then, of his kind of major hit, Don't Take Your Guns to Town. But since then, my song, I Still Miss Someone, has become one of the, and you can actually find this on the web, it's usually listed in the 100 classic country music songs. It's been recorded by over 100 different artists and groups over the years, and I still reap the benefits and royalties from writing the song. One of the other ones that I wrote, I'm really, really happy about it because it's a gospel song. It's called I Call Him. And that idea came from my mother, who had a habit of saying, when she needed prayer or needed some help, she would say, I call him. And it never really hit me until one day, Mom and Dad were sitting in the kitchen having a discussion, and I was in the room around the corner, listening, eavesdropping a little bit, and Mom finally kind of ended the conversation by saying, well, I call him. And I poked my head around the corner and it hit me and I said, Mom, that would be a great title for a song. And my dad, frustrated, kind of jerked up and said, well, go to your room and write it. Just about in that tone of voice. And so I did. And gave it to Johnny again. He actually recorded it on the first gospel album that he recorded for Sun or Columbia Records. I Call Him. It's a very, very simple, but I think very faith-filled gospel music. I Call Him.
Well, thank goodness then for boring accounting classes and a little family discussion that led to that.
Well, the accounting class helps me keep track of my royalties.
There you go. So you needed that. Now, Roy, on a much more serious note, I would like to dive into your outstanding military career. And one of my questions is, what led you to serve your country in this way, and most specifically as a Top Gun pilot?
Well, two things. I was raised in a family and at a time when serving your country was something that young men, particularly young men at that time, kind of expected they would be doing. And I felt it was my duty to do that. However, backtracking a little bit, when I was like 7 or 8 years old, we lived in the little town of Lucy, Tennessee, just up the road between Memphis and Millington. And my dad took me out to see the Blue Angels. the Blue Angels that were at Millington. And at that time, they were flying F-8F Bearcats, a propeller plane. But when I saw them fly, I told my dad, that's what I want to do. I want to be a Navy pilot.
You were 7 or 8?
7 or 8 years old. And that dream stayed with me until I made it come true, and by joining the Navy. So that's what led me to become a pilot. Always wanted to do that. My dad, bless his soul, wanted me to follow in Johnny's footsteps. He wanted me to stay in music because I had written some songs. I did some singing with a little band I had.
Hello again, old heartache. I can see you're back again. Like the tide rolls out to sea, it has to come back in. A cloud has closed the moonlight out, just like you closed the door. Hello again, old lonesome. Welcome back once more. Hello again. Same old memory. Heartbeat, hear my heartbeat. You walk by, sends a shiver up my spine. Hear my heartbeat. When you look at me, I get weak in the knees. Hear my heartbeat.
And he wanted me to do that, but I actually toured with Johnny on a couple of summers here in the U.S., up in Ohio, Iowa, even went to California, played with him and Willie Nelson, of all people. But I saw right away, that is not what I want to do. That is the life of
It's a hard life.
a hard life. And so I decided long before that, I want to be a pilot. I want to be a Navy pilot. And that's what I did.
Well, that's a hard life too, but a different kind of hard. So
It is, yes.
Well, since my Volume 4 students will be reading about Vietnam, which is so hard to understand, please enlighten us a bit of just your experience.
Well, my experience in Vietnam, 3 combat tours to Vietnam, and you mentioned in my bio, 305 combat missions. When the war first started, we as military professionals felt this was the right thing to do. We had gone into it to stop the advance of communism and hopefully stop the domino effect that was being talked about at that time. However, it didn't take long before we realized that the politicians were not going to let the military do the things necessary to win the war. And so it became a political war that seemed to have no ending, and in fact, really didn't have an ending. However, we were professionals. We felt we needed to be doing what our government and our country had tasked us to do. We were fighting for our country and following the orders of our leaders. And so that's what we did. When we came home, the first couple of times, we were welcomed. There were no yellow ribbons really exuberantly welcoming us, but we were considered professionals and kind of heroes, even though we weren't. The real heroes are the ones that didn't make it. But as time went by and the U.S. anti-war efforts kind of accelerated, it became a homecoming that many of us didn't like. Sailors and soldiers were spit upon. They were called names. I was called a baby killer. I had dropped bombs on parts of Vietnam, possibly killing some innocent people, don't know. Certainly that was something that we did not like, but we were military. We did as we were told, unless it was morally wrong, and we did not consider that a moral choice at the time. So that was just something that we did, and we are proud of our service to Vietnam. And today we get more thanks from people than we ever did back then. People will see me wearing something like this or my hat and say, "Thank you for your service." And we have a new response. When someone says that to us, we say, "You were worth it." And they seem to take that to heart. So I'm proud of the service I did for my country. I'm proud of any service that I can still do.
That's just beautiful. I'm sitting here thinking it was difficult for me to write about Vietnam because it's just so hard to unravel it. And the most sense I could make just for my students was to explain that it was a war of independence that devolved into a civil war. And then we were swept up in it with lofty goals in the beginning to, again, stop communism based on the Truman Doctrine. But then, as you have described, just devolved into so much more than that. So. Well, thank you for your service. I'll say it right here, right now.
You were worth it.
You're worth it. Thank you. Roy, it is evident that you have risked your life probably more times than you can even count. But please tell us more about the time you were shot down, rescued by a helicopter, and somehow were unharmed. You know, I get to watch movies about that kind of stuff or write about it, but you actually lived it. So please tell us that story.
Okay, I'll start off by saying it was Father's Day, 1972. A very neat day for this to happen, quite frankly. My mission with my wingman, there are two of us, two F-4s, was to do a sweep around Haiphong Harbor because at that time we had started mining the harbor to keep the North Vietnamese from getting resupplied. But we could only stop or attack certain ships. We couldn't attack Russian or Chinese ships. That would have started World War III. But our mission was simply to sweep through the harbor, take photos if possible, and note what ships were going in or coming out of the harbor. Well, there was a little rock island out in the middle of that harbor. Now, we'd been doing this mission for about 2 weeks, and that little rock island had been silent. But on this date, Father's Day, 1972, June 19th, 1972, we discovered, to my dismay, that they had placed an anti-aircraft gun on that little island. When I say a little rock island, I'm talking about an island that was no bigger than this house. Just a rock out in the middle of the harbor. And as we swept around in our left turn, the anti-aircraft gun opened up, and all of a sudden there were flashes and tracers and flak going off all around me, and I heard and felt a sudden pump, and my airplane had been hit in the left wing, and it basically blew most of the left wing off, and the aircraft started to roll. Airplanes don't fly very well with only one wing, and with the right wing, the aircraft rolled to the left, and I had to eject. And we were only at about 600 feet, and the Rio, the guy in the back seat, he got out as the aircraft was about like this, so he was pointed up. By the time my seat ejected, I was pointed down. And my parachute opened just about the time my boots hit the water. And I tell people when I speak, like Peter, there for a moment, I was walking on water. But like Peter, I immediately began to sink. And the parachute was going to be dragging me down because no matter what kind of flotation gear, and I had flotation gear, and the life vest would have helped if it weren't for the parachute, but the parachute was going to drag me down regardless. However, as I started down, I literally said to myself and to God, if you save me from this, I'm yours forever. And I saw what I can only describe as being the face of Christ. Now what it was, and there was a loud noise above me, I didn't know what it was at the time, but a helicopter had miraculously appeared, and there was no reason for the helicopter to be there. He should have been far out to sea, but they had come in close to the action for some unknown reason, and I never did find out why, really. But the helicopter had hovered over me, and a swimmer had jumped in the water. He saw my dire condition that I was being dragged down. Jumped in the water, and what I saw was actually him in a splash of water. To me, It was the face of Christ, there to save me. He began slashing the shroud lines of the parachute. I'm trying to get free of them, but I'm all tangled up and being pulled down and going up about here in the water, taking what I'm thinking is my last breath. And all of a sudden he disappears, but he's slashing the shroud lines down under the water, and I pop to the surface. I'm free of the shroud lines. And in a few seconds, it seemed like hours, he popped up to the surface too. What had happened, he had gotten tangled himself. And I found out this later because I have met the guy who saved me. He got tangled up, and he had to slash the shroud lines himself from around his flippers that had become entangled. And so he had gone down almost 25 feet, he estimated, before he was able to work himself free. And he popped to the surface, and when he popped to the surface, I said, "You okay?" And he said, "Yeah, let's get out of here." And the helicopter dropped their line with the rescue hoist, and he basically tied both of us to the thing. They hoisted us up into the helicopter, but before he started us up, I looked around and saw that the water was red, like blood. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm in shock, I'm wounded, and I don't even know it, because you can be in shock and not feel it, not know. But when we got into the helicopter, what they found was, in slashing the shroud lines, he had hit that big vein across his wrist, and he was spurting blood all over the place. They had to tend to him. I was fine. So they tended to him, they got us back to the ship. I got off the helicopter, reported to the captain what happened, and I was back on the flight schedule that afternoon.
Roy, I'm hearing that story, and so many things run through my mind. I almost don't have words, and that's hard for me. I usually have a lot of words. But I'm thinking that your life must have been flashing before your eyes.
Oh, yeah.
And this prayer, this answer to prayer, not just for you, but that other fella that day.
Yeah.
I mean, God answered your prayers. And here we are today. I'm very touched by your story. So thank you for sharing it.
Well, there's another aspect of it that
Tell.
I would like to tell. One of the things that I was thinking as I thought I was going down, Billy and I had planned for her to fly to Hong Kong and meet me in Hong Kong on July 4th. This is June 19th. And so we'd made plans to do that through our letters. And one of the things that crossed my mind, I mean, you think of all kinds of things, your kids, your life, but one of the crazy things I thought was, well, at least Billy won't have to waste money on a ticket to Hong Kong.
Right.
And that's about the time that I saw the face of Christ and the swimmer there to rescue me.
And then you also met the pilot, right?
Met the pilot who was flying the helicopter, and the swimmer. His name is Alan Gaynor. They call him Guppy, Guppy Gaynor. He and the pilot I still have communication and contact with. So I've met the guy that saved me, the pilot, and another gent that I think we're going to talk about here in a few minutes.
Okay, yes. And did you make it to Hong Kong with your wife?
We did. We certainly did.
So Roy, so many of my students know the Top Gun story because of the movie and of course the recent Maverick one. So I would like to know, as an insider, if you would tell us how much of that is Hollywood and how much of it is really accurate.
Well, a lot of it is Hollywood, but a lot of the Hollywoodized portions of it are actually doable. The mission that was flown in the latest movie seemed to be, probably to most people, something almost impossible. We devised and planned missions where aircraft had to make split-second timing turns in elevation and just back and forth all the time through the mountains of Southern California or Nevada. So the mission that they did, I would say, was possible, but probably a 1 in 1,000 kind of thing. Now, as far as Top Gun itself, I was commanding officer of Top Gun in 1980 to 1982 when the Hollywood people and the Secretary of the Navy started talking about making a movie. They came to Top Gun while I was commanding officer, did some filming, did some interviews, and talking about putting some stuff on film. But we thought, naively, I guess, they were talking about a documentary. And then 2 years later, boom, out comes the movie. So, and that movie was probably a little more Hollywoodized and fictional than the current one, because there's just no way that an aircraft carrier is going to go do what they did
In the first
without a major war being almost imminent. But the missions that they did, all the flying, by the way, was real. I mean, they actually did the flying and paid the Navy handsomely for the effort. So that part of it was real.
Well, real quick, I do have to know, because you landed about 1,200 times on those aircraft carriers. So just what is that like?
Well, we say that we could probably teach our mothers how to land an aircraft on an aircraft carrier, but there's no way you could teach one how to be a fighter pilot. I don't know whether that makes any sense or not. It did to us, but the landing on the carrier, quite frankly, is simply a matter of training and precision, and you practice that on the field, that where a landing area is mapped out and with the coordinates and the size like an aircraft carrier. And so you actually practice it on a field before you go out to the carrier. And so when you get out to the carrier, it's almost basically just like doing the training once again until you actually land on the carrier and the hook grabs a wire and you stop. Now that's
so
a joke.
The landing is the least of your concerns. It's everything else you've been doing that is what makes your day. Okay, well, I tell you, as a spectator, the landing looks pretty cool and hard.
The ones that we really were concerned about were the night carrier landings. There is nothing blacker than a black night at sea on an aircraft carrier. If there's no moon, no stars, if it's overcast, you can't imagine how black and how dark that is.
No, I can't imagine. I'm not even thinking you guys should be doing that at night, but if that's what you did.
But we did.
Okay, very good. So Roy, I alluded to the fact that you had shot down a Russian-made MiG, but there is so much more to that story. So please tell our listeners this amazing story of meeting that pilot.
Okay, in July of 1968, July 10th, 1968, my wingman and I engaged 3 MiG-21s over North Vietnam near Vinh. They did not know we were coming because one of our aircraft offshore was jamming their communication. So when we flew into the midst of them, it surprised them. They basically turned the wrong way. One of them turned and ran away. I don't know whether he was afraid or whatever, but he left the fight. The one that I was latched onto turned in front of me, and I was able to get behind him and fire a Sidewinder, which is a heat-seeking missile, and watched it to impact. As it impacted his aircraft, he ejected. And I watched him float down in his parachute, and that was the end of that. Our controllers told us to bug out. Bug out was a term we used for go home, basically get out of there. So we did. And so I thought that was the end of the story. I shot down a MiG-21, I got a Silver Star medal for it. Then, nearly 50 years later, the team that goes to Vietnam to try to account for MIAs and find remains of ones who are killed, got in contact with a group of North Vietnamese fighter pilot retired. They started putting names, dates, and places together and connected my engagement to the one with Pham Phu Thai on July 10th, 1968. The company or the department put us in contact with each other by email. We started emailing each other, introduced ourselves, sent pictures back and forth. Then in September of 2018, the State Department and the Vietnamese government sponsored a symposium in San Diego, California, where they brought 13 of their pilots over to meet with about 25 or 30 of our U.S. Navy, Air Force, and Marine pilots. and brought them up to our hotel room. They lined up and introduced us one by one. And I found out later, the one that I shot down was the senior officer there. He had become the senior officer in their Air Force. He stepped forward and introduced himself through a translator by saying, Captain Roy Cash, it is honor to meet you. You are welcome to come to my country in Hanoi if you promise to come unarmed. So I was meeting a guy with an absolute beautiful sense of humor and very, very shy kind of, but very humble. He even bowed before he introduced himself to me. But I have gotten to know him, got to know him and his wife and his son. We maintained contact, found out that he started flying at the age of 14 in Russia, where he was doing his training. And he had almost as much time in the aircraft that he flew as I did in the F-4. And one of the kind of unique things about the two of us, we have the same birthday. New Year's Eve, December 31st, except that we're 10 years apart. And when we did our brief at the symposium, he concluded it by saying, Roy Cash, Captain, you should consider it no big deal to shoot me down because I was just a kid. Well, that got a great laugh out of the crowd. But I responded, yes, General, and I'm glad our Department of Justice didn't find out, because if they had, they might have prosecuted me for assault on a minor. And that got a laugh too.
So he was 18 at the time?
He was 18 and I was 28.
Yeah. At the time of that
I was
encounter.
a lieutenant, and I'd been flying for about 5 years. He'd been flying for only about 4, but again, he had almost as much time in his supersonic MiG-21 aircraft as I had in the F-4.
A couple of questions. Was he injured?
He broke his arm when he landed on the ground. He landed in a bunch of rocks, broke his arm, but that was fixed, and he stayed in the Air Force. And as I said, retired as the VPAF, Vietnamese People's Air Force Chief of Staff.
With quite a story to tell.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Well, that story is so remarkable. I don't know in my own studies of history very many times when this has ever happened. We were speaking earlier about, there was the Christmas truce in World War I when you had soldiers, get acquainted. But, once again, such a rare event.
And World War II, German and American pilots, after the war, often met after the fact. And now it's happening in Vietnam.
Remarkable. I read in your bio that you speak on patriotism, which makes so much sense. And I've had the privilege of hearing some of that because you have performed the Ragged Old Flag at my own church. So our students are going to have access to that with your permission. But I'd like them to hear ahead of time the story behind that.
Okay. The Ragged Old Flag was written by Johnny in 1975. He wrote it kind of in response to what was going on at the time, Nixon's resignation. There was a lot of turmoil in the government and among the people about what was really going on in our country. And he wanted to do something patriotic, and so he did. He actually ran the piece by me while we were in Memphis on leave, I think. And I recommended the line about the flag flying from our ship at sea. He took that in. Then later, I added 2 verses after 9/11, the events of 9/11, to reflect current events in the world we now live in. The Ragged Old Flag, he first performed it when he came to the Naval War College, where I was going through the War College curriculum. He performed that for us there, and then a year later, he did it. He performed it for a joint session of Congress on our nation's bicentennial, July 4th, 1976, at which time I was stationed at the Pentagon. So Billy and I were able to be special guests in the gallery in the House chamber. So he performed that before the joint session of Congress.
I had no idea about all that background. That's just fascinating. And, I have been to the Johnny Cash Museum in Nashville.
Oh, yeah.
And I had a chance to see the presentation they give there, and it's just so moving. It
Yes.
truly is. I just can't wait for our students to see what I'm talking about. So how about that? Roy, I certainly admire so many things about you, especially in your line of service, but also it's the Christian faith that I know you have embraced, and I know it's carried you through so much of life.
Oh,
So
yes.
please share with our young people just how you came to know Christ and the difference he made in your life.
Okay. I came to the Lord at the age of 12, right here in Memphis, Tennessee. We lived in an area of Memphis called the Sherwood Forest, and attended a little church, a Baptist church called Beverly Hills Baptist Church in Memphis, Tennessee. We were having a revival, and on that particular Sunday, and the reason I remember this is because of what happened later, the only ones who attended that service were my grandmother Cash, and me. For some reason, my mom and my sisters and my dad did not attend. My dad didn't attend much anyway, but my grandmother and me attended. I felt strongly led to accept Christ. I told my grandmother. She said, well, you go on, Roy Jr., because that's what God is calling you to do. So I went down, professed my faith, and told them I wanted to be baptized because I repented my sins and I had become a Christian. And so when we got home, my dad immediately questioned what I'd done. And it's kind of funny now, but my grandmother said to her son, my dad, now Roy, don't you question Roy Jr. I was there and I know he became a Christian. So that's when I became a Christian. And I tease people and say, and I've walked the straight and narrow ever since. Not, of course not. But I've tried to keep that faith strong in what I do in my life, especially in the Navy, and it's hard. It was very hard and difficult at times in the Navy, particularly in squadrons like Top Gun, where I had to rein in some pretty wild behavior and attitudes of the people that in this day and time right now would probably get them thrown out of the Navy, maybe even arrested and prosecuted. But it was just something that I had to do as a Christian. I could not allow what was going on. I had to put a stop to one of the what we call the graduation follies, where they when the class graduated, they did all kinds of skits, and after the first one I saw, that became the last one while I was there. They teased me about it, but I could not let it stand. And I just told them, hey, I've got to stand on my faith, my Christian beliefs, and this kind of behavior is not going to be tolerated while I'm in command. And so that was the way it was at Top Gun. Now, and I mentioned before, when I got shot down, God got my attention again. We all stray, and how far I'd strayed, I don't know for sure, but I know that when I got shot down on Father's Day 1972, he said, watch this. He put me in the water and put me almost at death's door before that swimmer, Guppy Gaynor, jumped in to save me as what I considered and what I visualized as the face of Christ. I rededicated my life at that point, and I rededicate it so many times because we fall, we get up, we fall, and we get up. And that's the important thing. When we fall, we get up. So that's my faith story to this point, and I will fall again, I'm sure, but as long as I'm able, and God is there with me, and I know He is, as my mom said, I call Him, He's always there, I will get up.
Amen and amen. Yes. I too came to Christ in a revival setting, and it's kind of hard to even explain, but when you hear him, you hear him. And when he draws, he draws.
Yes.
So that's beautiful. I was 17, not 12. So I know what you mean about some parts of that. And how beautiful that you practice just some hard boundaries, especially in Top Gun. But I can't imagine how many lives you influenced by that. Not just what you did for your own family, the honor and respect it offered them, but just the lives who probably watched that and were changed.
I'm thankful to God for that.
Mm-hmm. Roy, clearly you have seen a lot in your many years. And may I ask your age? Share it with our students.
I am 82. I'll be 83 on New Year's Eve.
And how many years married?
59 years. It'll be 60 on July 4th. We got married on July 4th while I was in flight training. It was the only day the Navy would let me off. So we got married on the 4th of July, had a long weekend honeymoon, and the families all came down to Pensacola from Memphis. We were married in the Naval Aviation Chapel there on Pensacola by the chaplain, who counseled us very, very extensively before we were married. And then we had him years later come back and we renewed our vows on our 25th.
Oh.
Using the same chaplain, he used the same Bible and wore the same robe.
That is sweet. I
50,
love that story.
Almost 60 years.
There you go. Well, wise advice came from him then. Yeah.
Yes.
Well, what I'd like to ask is if you would just close with a message to our young people about how, again, faith has sustained you. And clearly the times that I grew up in and that you grew up in are different from what kids are facing today. So what timeless truths do you have for today's young people?
Well, the first thing I would tell them is never forget God is in control and He knows how it's going to end. The thing that I would ask students to do is believe and learn the mystery of history, if I will. If we don't learn from history, we're going to be doomed to repeat it. We need to learn things like the founding of our nation, the basic principles, where we all came from, the good and the bad. I mean, if we start erasing things that we didn't like, then like Churchill said, we're going to be repeating them. We need to learn from those mistakes and not repeat them. But I really encourage the young students today to study and learn their history of their founding, why we were founded, and that is we were founded on Judeo-Christian principles, the biblical principles that and precepts that we all should be leaning toward, and just keep that framework around everything that you study and learn in history, because that's what makes us who we are and will continue to make us who we need to be. So, students, God is in control, but you can learn from history the things that you need so that we can continue to make this country what it ought to be. And I know that Linda's Mystery of History is a program that has roots well founded in that regard, and I just encourage you to dig into it deeply and learn everything you can from the mystery of history and the language that it tells you.
Thank you. And I didn't even pay you for that part of the mystery of history for adding that endorsement. But sincerely, you and I share a passion for this subject. You, from what you've lived, again, through your service, how history has contributed to that and how you have shaped history by what you've done. I still feel like I am but a spectator and I'm just retelling the stories, but it is for the sake of our young people today. Well, Roy, once again, I want to thank you so very, very much for sharing your time with us today, your inspiration, your faith. So thank you.
Thank you. It's been my privilege and my pleasure to contribute. I've learned a lot just from reading your the volume 4 that I helped with, and hope that it did help. The mystery of history is really it enthralls me just to think about the way it's approached in your program. So my thanks for even allowing me to contribute.
Students, thank you so much for joining me. I hope you've been as inspired as I am, and I hope you feel like you have a new role model. I know we all need them now more than ever. So I think we have found one in Mr. Roy Cash, who I am grateful for. Now, I want to remind you to watch The Ragged Old Flag, as we have provided some access to that. And if you want to explore all volumes of The Mystery of History, visit our website, themysteryofhistory.com. And parents, if you are looking for some additional encouragement or inspiration from a biblical worldview toward home education, I do have a new podcast. It would be called The Mystery of Home Education, and you can access that through my website as well as through Apple Podcasts and Spotify. So to all my friends, until we meet again, may the Lord bless you and keep you for the sake of the mystery.
I walked through a county courthouse square. On a park bench, an old man was sitting there. I said, "Your old courthouse is kind of run down." He said, "No, it'll do for our little town." I said, "But your old flagpole is leaned a little bit, and that's a ragged old flag you got hanging on it." He said, "Have a seat." And I sat down. "Is this the first time you've been to our little town?" I said, "I think it is." He said, "Now, I don't like to brag, but we're kind of proud of that ragged old flag. You see, we got a little hole in that flag there when Washington took it across the Delaware. And it got powder burned the night Francis Scott Key sat watching it writing, 'Say, can you see?' It got a little rip in New Orleans with Packingham and Jackson tugging at its seams. And it almost fell at the Alamo beside the Texas flag. She waves on, though. It got cut with a sword at Chancellorsville. It got cut again at Shiloh Hill. There was Robert E. Lee, Beauregard, and Bragg. Yeah, the south wind blew hard on that ragged old flag. On Flanders Field in World War I, she got a big hole from a Bertha gun. She turned blood red in World War II, but stood strong and proud by the time it was through. She was in Korea, Vietnam. Yeah, she goes where she's sent by her Uncle Sam. Why, Native Americans, African Americans, Asians, Hispanics, and whites have all shed red blood for those stars and stripes. She flies from our ships upon the briny foam, but you know, they've just about quit waving her back here at home. Why, in her own good land, she's been abused, burned, dishonored, denied, refused. And the government for which she stands, scandalized throughout our land. And she's getting threadbare, wearing kind of thin. But you know, she's in good shape for the shape she's in. Well, she's been through the fire before. Back on 9/11, 3 firefighters raised her from the ashes once more. He paused and kind of wiped a tear away and said, "Mister, we got to thank our God each and every day. Because all those Americans that fought and died have bought us our freedom and patriots' pride. So we got to make sure we exercise those rights and stand in allegiance to those stars and stripes. And so we raise her up every morning, bring her down slow at night. We don't let her touch the ground, and we fold her up right. Well, you know, mister, on second thought, I guess I do like to brag, because I'm mighty proud of that ragged old flag."